We all face exams, yet not the ones written on paper, but the ones written by life. When failure seems final, faith becomes the only answer sheet. This is the story of Aarav, a boy who lost everything, yet learned how faith can turn life's hardest tests into miracles. The morning sun rose slowly over the small town of Bhavangar, its golden rays brushing the roofs of modest homes and dusty streets. In one of those homes lived Aarav, a 17-year-old student whose eyes carried both dreams and doubts. His final school exams were just days away, but this time it wasn't just about grades. It was about his future. It was about his family's hope. It was about faith. Aarav's father, once a teacher, had lost his job 2 years ago when the school closed due to financial troubles. His mother worked at a tailor shop, stitching clothes late into the night. Their lives revolved around a single hope, that Aarav would become the first in the family to attend college. "Your success is our prayer," his mother would whisper every night before he went to bed. And every time she said that, Aarav felt both strength and pressure tighten inside him. It was the final week before exams. Aarav studied from dawn till midnight, sometimes with candlelight when the power went out. His small study table was covered in notes, worn-out books, and a cracked calculator. But his determination was steady. Still, deep down, fear whispered to him, "What if I fail? What if I let them down?" At school, his friends seemed confident, even careless. They joked about results, planned cricket matches, and talked about vacations. But Aarav couldn't laugh along. For him, failure wasn't an option. It was a nightmare. One evening, as he sat by the window watching the sunset fade, his father quietly entered the room. He placed a hand on Aarav's shoulder and said, "Son, life's real exams don't come with question papers. They come with problems, pain, and patience. If you can face those with faith, you'll pass any test." Aarav smiled weakly, not fully understanding. But he would, very soon. 3 days before his first exam, tragedy struck. Aarav's father collapsed while returning from a part-time tutoring job. The doctor's words cut through their world like a storm. "His heart is weak. He needs immediate surgery." The cost was far beyond what they could afford. His mother broke down, clutching the medical report, while Aarav stood frozen, staring at the floor. The walls of hope that had held their family together began to crack. He wanted to scream. He wanted to cry. But instead he whispered to himself, "Not now. I have to be strong." That night he sat beside his father's hospital bed, holding his cold hand. Machines beeped softly around them. His father's voice, faint but firm, said, "Aarav, don't miss your exam because of me. Remember, this too is part of the exam of life." Tears rolled down Aarav's face. He nodded silently, torn between duty and love. The next morning, Aarav walked into the examination hall with swollen eyes and an empty heart. His mind was elsewhere, in the hospital room, beside the man who had taught him how to hold a pencil, how to dream, how to believe. He looked at the paper in front of him. The words blurred through his tears. His hands trembled. For the first time, his faith felt weaker than his fear. In that moment, he closed his eyes. He remembered his father's voice, in steady, calm, unwavering. "If you believe you can, you will. If you believe you can't, you won't." He took a deep breath, gripped his pen, and began to write. Hour after hour, he fought through the fog of worry and exhaustion, answering each question as if it were a battle between faith and fear. When the bell rang, he collapsed over his desk, not in relief but in quiet surrender. He had done his best. The rest was in God's hands. Days passed. Aarav balanced between the hospital and his exams. He barely slept. He prayed constantly. Each night he sat outside under the stars and whispered, "Please, just save him." But one evening as he arrived at the hospital with his last paper still in hand, he saw nurses rushing, alarms beeping, and his mother crying outside the room. His father was gone. The world fell silent. The walls spun around him. His knees gave way, and he dropped the paper he was still holding. It drifted down, landing near his father's bed, the paper of his last exam soaked with tears. Faith, for the first time, felt like a cruel illusion. He stopped studying. He stopped smiling. He stopped believing. Days became weeks. His father's words echoed in his mind, but now they hurt more than they healed. One morning his mother handed him an envelope. It was addressed in his father's handwriting. Aarav hesitated, his hands shaking as he opened it. Inside was a letter. My dearest Aarav, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't stay to see the results of your hard work. But remember, life's results are not printed on paper. They are written in how you live, love, and rise again. The exam of life doesn't end when you lose something. It begins when you choose to keep going despite it. Don't give up, my son. I may not be there to hold your hand, but my faith walks beside you every step of the way. Baba tears blurred the ink as Aarav held the letter to his chest. Something inside him reignited, a spark of faith buried under grief. That night, he went to the same window where he once studied. The world outside hadn't changed, but he had. He looked up at the stars and whispered, "I'll make you proud, Baba." Months later, the results were announced. Aarav's friends screamed in excitement, calling and texting each other. Aarav sat quietly in front of the computer, his heart pounding as he entered his roll number. Result: passed with distinction. He stared at the screen, tears flowing freely. He wasn't just crying because he had passed. He was crying because he had finally understood the meaning of faith. Faith wasn't about believing that life would go as planned. Faith was believing even when it didn't. He ran outside, held the letter to the sky, and whispered, "Baba, I did it." Years passed. Aarav earned a scholarship and became a teacher, just like his father. He returned to his hometown and started teaching children who couldn't afford tuition. He taught them math, but more than that, he taught them faith. One day, a student named Rishi came to him in tears after failing a test. Aarav smiled gently and said, "Rishi, do you know what my father once told me? The exam of life isn't about getting every answer right. It's about never giving up, no matter how hard the questions become." The boy looked up, curious. Aarav continued, "Sometimes God gives you the hardest test, not to break you, but to show others how strong faith can make you." Rishi nodded slowly, his tears fading into a smile. Aarav watched him go, his heart swelling with quiet pride. His father's words had passed through him, into the next generation. Years later, Aarav stood at the same hospital where his father once lay. This time he wasn't a son. He was a volunteer, visiting sick children, offering them books, food, and hope. One evening, a young boy asked, "Sir, are you not scared of hospitals?" Aarav smiled softly. "I used to be, but I learned something. Sometimes, the place where you lose hope becomes the same place where you find faith again." He handed the boy a small notebook titled, "The Exam of Life." Inside were stories, quotes, and lessons, all inspired by his journey. Before leaving, he looked back one last time at the hospital corridor, his eyes glistening but peaceful. He whispered, "Thank you, Baba, for teaching me how to pass the hardest test." Life continued to test Aarav, with failures, rejections, loneliness, and moments of doubt. But now, he faced each one differently. He had learned that faith is not the absence of fear. It's the courage to move forward despite it. Every time he stood before his students, he would begin class with the same line. "Remember, life is not an exam you prepare for once. It's an exam that teaches you while you're living it." And somewhere deep within him, he felt his father's unseen hand resting on his shoulder, whispering, "Well done, my son. You've passed." Moral of the story: the real exam of life doesn't test your memory, it tests your faith. Grades, failures, and losses come and go. But faith, that quiet belief that light still exists even in the darkest tunnel, is what carries you through every storm. So when life questions you, don't be afraid of the test. Answer with faith, patience, and love, because the greatest result is not written on paper, it's written in your heart.